Talking about farts, right?
Yeah, absolutely talking about farts. We are joined actually by a good friend of mine, a person who is what is known as a luthier, or in Montreal we call you a luthier. A
Well,
luthier, a maker and fixer of guitars. It's my friend Robin. Robin, say hello.
hello.
You've been actually kind enough to join me to kind of talk about what you do, and that honestly, this has been one of the things I've been looking forward to the most, is having this conversation with you. So I appreciate you spending some time, just kind of talking about your job, like what you do, and kind of like what motivates you. So I guess might as well start at the beginning. Do you remember the last or the first time that you ever touched or looked at a guitar? Do you have like a memory in your mind's eye of
I
this?
mean, like, physically?
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, like, I like all Canadian kids who came up in the 80s and 90s, was constantly watching much music like everyone else. And I think the first guitar that ever really spoke to me was like the Gibson Explorer from the one Metallica video there.
Oh, wow.
I think that would have been like the first thing that kind of sucked me in. And then like my first guitar that I purchased was actually a fucking Strat. So
Wow. Okay.
there's
So
no.
yeah. Well, okay, but like, what about the first time you ever touched guitar? Let me tell you mine, because mine's really early, really early. When I was probably 3 or 4 years old, my dad had a guitar, like, you know, the Ovation sort of like guitars that have like the rounded back.
Indeed, I do.
So my dad had an off-brand version of that called an Applause, and
Mhm.
it was a beautiful sort of like guitar that had a plastic shell on the back, and it was sort of a black into red and brown sunburst kind of configuration. And I used to strum it, like, because my dad would just leave it out. He'd play sometimes, and you know, that was obviously my first little foray into guitar. Like I was probably 4. But when aside from seeing it in Metallica, when was the first time you actually touched a guitar? Do you remember?
I think I was about 6 or 7, and it was my grandfather's acoustic. He used to take it out every once in a while and sort of play it when we'd be visiting, kind of thing. But he wasn't like a consistent player. But it was also, I've got it over actually in a case, like over on the shelf there. I inherited it after he passed. It's like a 70s Matsumoku factory, like cheapy acoustic guitar that he had purchased somewhere. I'm gonna say secondhand because that would have been like a very him thing to do, like yard sale kind of thing.
Right.
But he'd done some work to it himself, like he had rebridged it and whatnot. And I'm not gonna judge him on the caliber of his work. I mean, it was.
Well, part of you is, like, let's be honest.
Yeah, but he was the guy who was like, tinkering in the basement. He was that kind of dude. He had rebridged it, and he'd put a couple of screws in the wings of the bridge to
Your grandfather did?
kind of. Yeah. I inherited when he passed away. I inherited a couple of his guitars, a couple that he'd worked on, and then a box of just like random parts, like acoustic bridges, old school like 60s and 70s, like plastic button 6-in-line, 3-in-line tuners, and like all this other stuff. So it was like me making the jump into Lutherie isn't really a huge stretch, given I kind of grew up seeing this guy like build anything, fix anything. He was like a woodworking type. Had a little shop in his basement, make gun stocks, and like I've got vivid memories of him from when I was a child, of him like polishing and oiling gun stocks and stuff like this. So I mean, like, me doing this now is a huge reach.
Well, let me say on behalf of myself, at least, that I'm very happy that you decided on guitars and not guns. So there you go.
There's probably more money in guns.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah, there's definitely a market for guns.
Just saying.
Getting dark early. So would you say, actually, because I didn't know this about you, so you probably say that your grandfather was sort of like one of the first little catalysts for you being kind of a tinkerer on guitars in general.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. Just watching him fix anything as a kid, like it isn't necessarily about lutherie per se. It's just I have like this unquenchable thirst to fix stuff,
right?
Or build stuff. Like I constantly have to be doing something, making something, fixing something. Just so happened I specialized in guitars, so I'm going to be fucking poor forever. So you were, and that I sort of did know about you. You're obviously a handy person in general. Like you're good with working on things and tinkering on things with your hands, and you've even sort of made certain pieces of equipment in the shop, like sort of just through innovation and basically you've worked on just sort of anything that just needs something, you just do it and make the most out of what you have around you, right? So it's that sort of MacGyver style. Yeah.
Right? So with somebody who's such a tinkerer, do you have like a favorite type of guitar repair or task? Like the one that when you do it, you're like, yeah, okay, I can do this. I can do this all day. Do you have like out of all the tasks that you do, is there, and it could be anything. It could be, shaping a neck, or, it could be painting, it could be any of it. Do you have like a favorite task?
Pushing stuff through my table saw. Like literally any excuse. Like, oh, you need something cut to a specific size. Like, hell yeah, let's get the table saw involved. I'm always angling to use that thing for some reason.
It's a very visceral experience, the table saw. It's like,
I've had to build so many jigs and fucking fixtures and sleds and like all of this stuff for this table saw over the years. And like I've been rocking this table saw for like a decade at this point. And I don't know, there's something about it. It's like the idea of cutting something really precisely with something so huge and crude, like it's kind of a beautiful thing.
It's true. It's very true. All right. Well, on the other side then, so aside from splitting giant things in half on a table saw, what's some of your least favorite things to do? Because I follow you on Instagram, and I've seen, for example, I mean, maybe I'm blowing up the spot here, but fret pulling, not your favorite thing.
I complain about a lot of things. I mean, let's be real.
Well, I mean, yeah, but at that, yes, you do, but in a very charming way. I mean, let's be honest. But what about your? Do you have like a top 5 like things that even the things you love to complain about the most about the job?
Number 1, neck resets. Sweet fucking Jesus, what an awful task. Getting the neck off, getting it back in there, and like getting the correct neck angle. Like, I hate it. I try to avoid actually even taking them. It's such a shit show sometimes.
So neck resets are basically the devil's taint. Anything else?
I would say the neck reset takes up the top 3 of that 5 easily. Like,
so, okay, but what is it about a neck reset that makes it so cumbersome? Like, what is it? Like, walk me through it, because I mean, I know very, very little about the mechanical aspect of how to do this stuff. So let's turn this into a therapy session. Walk me through the trauma of a neck reset.
The worst part about the neck reset, aside from putting the neck on, is taking the fucking thing off. Like, I've tried a number of different techniques over the years, steaming them out, using the Ian Davlin style rods that mount into your soldering iron. Like, it's just drilling the two holes to make sure you get in on either side of the tenon. Like, you can't see what you're doing. It's like this weird job that's completely dependent on feel. There's a certain amount of guesswork involved. Like, even just drilling those two pilot holes just to get the rods or the steamer or something in there to get this neck off.
Right.
It's terrifying. Like, the pucker factor involved in that job is gigantic.
I want things to be measured in pucker factor going forward.
There's no uniformity to a lot of this stuff either. Like, certain Martins have certain joints, certain Gibsons have certain joints, like, right. and Yamahas are totally fucking different. It's like, the second you get this guitar on your bench, you're trying to, like, mentally, like, play through how you're going to do this. It's like, holy fuck, I hope I hit pocket.
So it's funny you mentioned, different, because the guitar is such a, it's something that's as decorative as it is functional. Not even decorative. Decorative is a bad word, but the form it's like a vase, right? Because vases they have a sort of a universal platonic, whatever ideal of what it might be, but all of the representations of that. And this is what guitars are. It's basically like there's the neck, the headstock going down into the body, into the bridge. So, like, it has acknowledged components, but all of those things are built differently by different people and sometimes to varying degrees of quality. The form factor of the body influences not only the way it plays, but the way it looks, the way it functions, its like its shelf life, So I think I have a basic understanding of that. It's just more like, out of all those types of guitar forms and bodies and stuff like that, probably the best and the worst of all of these different kinds of guitars. I think I have a good line on what your favorite kinds are, but, like, do you have a couple of real sentimental favorites? They could be like complete, like, bags of trash too. Like, maybe it's just something you love for its aesthetic component as opposed to its functional component. Like, do you have, like, favorites to work on or even favorites to look at?
What if I told you that there was one guitar that hits, like, all of those?
Yep.
The SG Junior. The Gibson SG Junior. It is a beautiful guitar, and it is so simple and so functional at the same time. Like, there's no fucking around. Like, you get a volume, you get a tone, you get a jack, you got a wraparound, like, stop tail bridge thing. Like, they're really well balanced. They're incredibly light.
Right.
I mean, it's all there.
So the SG Junior model, because it's simpler, because it's almost like it takes away the extra bullshit. Is that kind of what you're?
Yeah, it's everything you need in this crappy old slab of mahogany.
I've always liked the SGs. Always made me think of the '60s Batman sort of, like, curves, like the bat logo of like the tops of the wings always reminds me of the SG. I've had actually one SG that I had when I was a younger man. I had one of these. I think Monster Magnet might have played one, but it was like an SG with three humbuckers. It was a white body with gold pickups. But little did I know that I had this guitar until I was too poor to own it, and then I had to sell it for rent money like 20 years ago. But little did I know that the thing had actually been miswired, so I never actually got the full functionality of that guitar. So I had that guitar just because it looked like, and I'm not a Monster Magnet fan. It's just more like I thought the guitar looked super cool. It was the opposite of the way that I styled myself. So it was just one of these things that ooh, that's pretty. And it was like, I think it might've been an Epiphone, because, you know, who has Gibson money? But I always thought that guitar was extremely beautiful. And then I had to hawk it for like less than $200. So it was depressing.
Ugh.
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's I always loved that body. I always thought the SG was great. You know, our mutual friend Omar, who I'm in a band with, he has one, and it's his favorite one. It's his favorite one to play. Most of the time, like, the tone is perfect, the weight is perfect too, because that's the thing about the SG is that it's kind of like a sneaky Strat, you know, in a way, in the sense where it's light, so it feels very like not even there light, but it has unlike the Strat, it has a kind of very monster thick tone if you want it to, like it, because it usually leans on humbucker pickups as opposed to single coils. Most of the time it sounds really thick, but it's very thin on the body. It's actually very extremely light. Yeah. So good shout though. Good shout on. So you're saying the SG Junior, which is probably something that somebody would buy for like a 12-year-old, you know, who's looking to start playing guitar, is literally the platonic ideal for you for an electric guitar. Hot takes, Robin. Hot takes.
Yeah, I don't even know how to come back at that. I'm not a big humbucker guy, so I think what attracts me to the SG Junior of all things is that, like, big fat dog ear pickup, like P90 in the bridge. I'm a huge fan of, you know, big flat pickups, I guess.
So like flat, like basically flat single pickups as opposed to coiled, and as opposed to humbuckers, which is basically two single coils thrown together.
The humbucker has its place, and I've played a lot of humbuckers over the years that I've really enjoyed, but like my own personal sound, my own personal style is like sort of rests with either the P90 or the Jazzmaster, like soap bar style pickup.
Right. And you were known, like when we first started kind of like speaking to each other, you were kind of known for your work on the offset type of guitar, like the Jazzmasters and Jaguars of the world, and obviously that would lend to you having a soft spot for, you know, for P90s and stuff like that. That definitely makes sense. Like, is there a tone that you like about the P90 that is like more ideal than either a humbucker, which usually sounds a lot wider, or a single coil, which sounds more focused? What's the P90 in relation to that universe for you?
I don't know. I like really dark bassy shit. Like, as far as, you know, personal preference for sound goes, right. And like, granted, you can get some really, really bright tones out of like the Jazzmaster pickups and the P90s and what stuff, and it's more dependent on, I guess, what's in it for wiring, like what resistance,
and its position on the bridge, and, you know, like basically how close to the bridge it is.
I mean, if you run one of those big fat awful Jazzmaster pickups through a 250K pot as opposed to like the 1 meg pot, like it takes all of that weird kind of chiminess out of it and makes it into this really dark sounding kind of pickup.
Right.
I've always been a huge fan of that.
How many guitars do you actually own yourself right now?
3, and then there's a 4th that I don't really own, but dude just never came to get it. So
I have some equipment like that. I have some. Some equipment like that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 61 Melody Maker. I put a considerable amount of work into turning it into an actual playable guitar again. The bill on it is fairly substantial, and should he come to clear it, I would hand him that guitar and bid him a good day. But if he doesn't come pick it up, I'm totally happy to just hang on to it forever.
So you basically bought it with sweat equity until otherwise he pays the bill.
basically, yeah. And like it's been years. I've had this thing in my possession now for like 6 years, probably.
Damn. Yeah,
Yeah.
that you're pretty much there. Like you've that's a possession is 9/10 of the law kind of situation for sure.
Yep.
So aside from the one that you now own through by essentially a proxy, what are the other three? What do you got?
I've got a 70s Yamaha. It's an SG80T. It weighs about 4 million pounds. It's a sitter.
It has a Mercury core.
Might as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like a really beautiful bastardization of like an old Supro and a Jazzmaster and sort of a Les Paul at the same time. Like,
oh wow,
it's heavy.
It's like, does it need its own stand? You know, like one of those fusion jazz players that just has the guitar on a stand he walks up to.
That would be recommended.
It's good for the back.
I've done a handful of jams with it over the years, and it's really hard on the shoulder after a while. Like it's beastly. I can see why they didn't take off. Having said that, it does sound pretty great.
I'm sure, but yeah. So the what are the others?
I've got a 90s MIJ Mustang Olympic white, the standard. It's got the contoured body and not the traditional like uncontoured slab. And then I've got a Mustang base, also Olympic white. It's pretty much it. It's a mid 2000s MIJ.
Oh wow. Okay.
It's tricky. It thumps like a Mustang bass does. I mean, it's really all you can ask for.
I like how the guitars that you own are kind of like a ragtag group. It's like you have a brother and a sister in Olympic white, and then you've got the big heavy BA Baracus guitar, and then you've got like the sort of like the outlier that had to join the group by some sort of weird happenstance. It would make a great heist movie, to be honest with you.
I feel weird that I actually have a Gibson, but I guess I don't own a Gibson. I've never owned a Gibson.
Yeah.
Because
you're caretaking for a Gibson right now. You're fostering a Gibson. Let's just say that.
It's better than birthing one, I'm assuming.
It would be really painful to birth a Gibson guitar, I think. My first electric guitar was essentially a Christmas gift that was an inheritance from my uncle. My uncle basically was totally into hair metal. And it's like at one point in his late teens, early 20s, he decided to get a job, and he completely like cut off this beautiful mop of curly locks. And all of a sudden, you know, a few months later, around Christmas time, I had this Charvel Model 6 complete unibody guitar. It has like, I think it has like the Floyd Rose sort of like tremolo sort of system. So it was I was 14. So it was the most complex and delicate guitar for somebody who's 14 years old to own as their first electric. And it sort of messed me up a little bit because it just sort of felt like metal is a world of exclusion. No matter what metal genre you're talking about, it's always subgenre. So it's designed to feel exclusionary. So getting this guitar, it was like probably as a teenager, imposter syndrome is so kind of built in, right? But
it totally goes away over time.
but this guitar was the essence of imposter syndrome, because you walk up to it and it's like you're touching an alien. Like it didn't feel like an actual guitar. Like it was beautiful. It had like its own special case, you know, like, and it's got the unibody, which is really interesting. But like I kept on thinking to this day, like it's really, really difficult to sort of like make that all work. And I don't understand why people would even do that. Like, is there a functional reason why a unibody would even be made, or is a separate neck is there a reason why the separate neck is an accepted standard? Is it just ease of building?
It would be ease of building. I mean, is separate neck an acceptable standard? There's a lot of guitars made over the years that were one piece or like one long piece and then some wings cut into a very pointy, awkward shape
Right.
for their metal dicks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I think it's out of cost cutting more than anything for a lot of these companies just like churning out these guitars. Wood's expensive.
yeah, wood is expensive.
Is that one of those Led Zeppelin songs where that Robert Plant guy sings about his penis a whole bunch?
Oh, well, I mean, he built an entire legacy on his penis.